So once you see the data, you can't unsee it. And so any apartment that you think about submitting an offer in on, you're going to want to look at the data before you do it. This is pillar number three of buying an apartment in New York. If you haven't watched my other two pillars, you can watch those here. I'm Daniel Chun, a former attorney turned real estate broker and developer in New York City. My mission is to help you make fully informed real estate decisions. Pillar number three is know the data. When I first became a broker, I thought that brokers had some special access or some special way to tell me what a property was worth. I realized pretty quickly that there wasn't anything behind the curtain. The main way to do it was to enter an address into some software or website portal that we had access to, click a button that generates a comp report, and then voila, that was our comp report. My undergrad background was in databases as an information and systems engineer. So when I looked at how bad the data was, I was horrified. The data accuracy was terrible. There were outliers that skewed the results. The report from this system didn't match the report from that system, and there was no transparency as to the algorithm or how those reports were actually generated. It was a nightmare. So to me, it was an integrity thing. How can I possibly advise my clients on what to do with millions of dollars in real estate without having good data? So that's when I started on my own journey to find the most accurate data and complete data. Let me start with the question, why is data important? Have you ever wondered if what you're about to spend millions of dollars on is a good deal? And how do you define, what's a good deal? It's not just about how much of a discount off of the asking price you get, because asking prices are set by the seller or the listing agent. And sometimes those asking prices are too high, and sometimes they're actually too low, and sometimes there's a strategy behind the pricing. So the key is you have to make a determination of what the value of a property is independent of the asking price. And in order to do that, you have to look at the data. So once you see the data, you can't unsee it. And so any apartment that you think about submitting an offer in on, you're going to want to look at the data before you do it. And once you have this knowledge, because so few people have the ability to do this level of analysis, you're going to have a really big edge on the market. These are the three must-see buckets of data you're going to want to review before you buy a home. The first bucket is historical listings. The second bucket is the supply and demand dynamics. And the third bucket is a 360-degree view of comps. The first bucket, historical listings. Let's say you want to buy a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home with outdoor space in a target neighborhood. Day one of your search, we send you 5 to 10 years worth of listing inventory that fits your criteria. That's a tight fit of your criteria. It's going to be about, 50 to 75 listings. Let's say you flip through that in a single evening because you're addicted to real estate listings. Using the fundamentals that I talk about in pillar number 2 as a guide, along with your own personal criteria, you identify the top 5 to 10 properties that are ideal for you in that neighborhood. Now, these are all properties that have either sold in the past or were listed in the past. They're not on the market now. So why am I showing you this? It's because of one or two things. One, you might realize that what you're looking for actually doesn't exist It doesn't exist at all in the neighborhood within your price point. And you have to decide whether certain features of the apartment are most important to you, in which case you'd have to look in other neighborhoods, or if being in that neighborhood is more important than those other features of the apartment or fundamentals of the apartment that you care about. The other thing is you begin to realize what exactly your target's going to be in that neighborhood. And you might notice that only one or two of those units come up per year in that neighborhood over the last 5 to 10 years. And so you know that when you see one come up that matches your criteria, you know it's the real deal, and you'll have the confidence to be able to be aggressive on that unit. Now, of course, you need to see actual apartments in order to really know what matters to you, but doing this early on in your search is going to give you a huge edge on the market and streamline your search. The second bucket of data you want to see before you buy has to do with the most basic market dynamic: supply versus demand. If you care about protecting the value of your home, before you buy, you have to ask the question, what does the supply look like in this neighborhood? So one neighborhood can have 10 two-bedrooms and another neighborhood can have 100. And if the demand is the same, which of those neighborhoods do you think has the best chance of having their property values increase over time? The one with less supply. Now, what if the supply in that neighborhood has the chance of increasing to 100 units? Is that something important to know? Absolutely. You want to know what new developments are in construction in that neighborhood and how much supply is that going to add to the neighborhood. You want to know, does the zoning even allow for new development going forward in the neighborhood? Maybe it's a low-rise neighborhood, or maybe it's a historic district that doesn't actually allow new supply or new development to be built. Or if there is possibility for new development, is there something that's special about that property that will protect its value over time? So that can be, maybe it has direct water views, or it's right next to the only subway line that is in a neighborhood that is in high demand. And so any new development will be further and further away and therefore less prime in that neighborhood. So that's supply, fairly straightforward. But how do you track demand? There are a few ways to do this. One of the main ways is to look at days on market. If all the two bedrooms in one neighborhood are on the market for 2 weeks before they're gobbled up, then the demand is high. And if that's the same for the 100 units that are on the market in this other neighborhood, they all get gobbled up in 2 weeks, then the demand actually exceeds the supply in both of those neighborhoods, even though the supply might be drastically different. So if you ever buy in new development where there's 300 units in the building, they don't put all of those units on the market at once because it will flood the supply. They only put a few that are representative of all of the units in the building, and then once, let's say, the A line starts to sell, then they slowly increase the pricing as the supply for that line decreases. Side note, new development is its own beast. And as a developer myself, I kind of understand both sides. So if you want to hear more about new development, let me know in the comments and I'll create a separate video for that. The third bucket of data you want to see is what I call Comps 360. You want to get a 360-degree view of all of the relevant comps so that you can make a fully informed decision on the valuation of a property. So when it comes to comps, people tend to think just about what's sold in the building. And this data is, most accessible to everybody in New York City. And it is the most relevant, but it shouldn't end there. You actually want to also see comps that are relevant in buildings in the area, and then comps that are relevant in similar neighborhoods that you're open to. So here's an example. Let's say you found an apartment in Cobble Hill and it's 1.5 million asking price, and it's a co-op in a brownstone building on a tree-lined street. It's been fully renovated, but some original details still remain. It's very charming. Here's what you want to see. First, you want to see what's sold in the building. So you look and you realize that nothing has sold for at least 5 years in the building. So what do? Next, you have to look at the most relevant comps in similar buildings in the area. And the key here is that they have to be the most relevant comps. That means other non-doorman buildings that are walk-ups on a tree-lined block. You can't lump in doorman buildings and new construction into your analysis because it's going to completely skew your results. And if you're including renovated and unrenovated apartments, you have to make adjustments according to the level of renovation so that you're not comparing apples to oranges. And there are other adjustments you have to make, but once you make those adjustments, you're going to see that there might be 3 or 4 comps that are actually the most relevant to that apartment. And you may have started with 20 comps, but it's only those 3 or 4 that are actually the most relevant and the most telling as to what the value of that home is. Now you have an accurate valuation of what the market says the value of the home is, independent of the listing price. Sometimes that's all you need to submit your offer, but that's not always the full story. Now you have an accurate value of what the market says based on comps of what the home is worth, but that may not fully tell you what the apartment is worth to you. Is it optimal for you? And to find out, you have to ask the question, what does this, let's say it's 1.5 million, what does this 1.5 million get you in other neighborhoods that you're open to? And here's the reality. Today's New York City buyers have more information and are open to more neighborhoods. The Upper West Side buyer is also interested in Brooklyn Heights and Cobble Hill. The first-time home buyer with the $1.5 million budget might be open to 5 or 6 different neighborhoods in Manhattan and Brooklyn, just trying to find out what they can get. So if what you want costs $1.5 million in 5 out of 6 of those neighborhoods, and in only one neighborhood it costs 1.3, if you're a value-driven buyer, then you might buy that one that costs 1.3 because it's cheaper, and at some point in theory that apartment might become 1.5, and it could happen very quickly. Or you might say that the 1.5 in the Upper West Side is worth more to me because it means a shorter commute, or it's closer to this or that school, and that means more time with my family. When you look at the building and then other buildings in the area and then other neighborhoods that are relevant to you, you get a full 360-degree view of the comps, which puts you in a better position to find not just what works for you, but what's actually optimal for you. To recap, the 3 buckets of data you want to see before you buy are historical listings, the data behind supply and demand, and a 360-degree view of comps. So by this point, I hope I've shown you why data is important. To be clear, it's not that the data should force you into making a decision to buy or not buy a home. No one ever says, hey, Dan, here's my criteria. I want sweeping views, I want a beautiful tree lined street, and I want amazing data. No one ever says that. It's not all about the data, but making a fully informed decision does involve looking at the relevant data. That's what my mission is to help you make fully informed real estate decisions. There are no guarantees in life, whether in the real estate market, the stock market, or in business as an entrepreneur. But it doesn't mean that there aren't actions that you can take to stack the odds in your favor. Subscribe for more of my content as a broker and developer in New York City. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Till next time.